feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast, and we are brought to you by Prize Picks. Coming in Monday afternoon, it's June 9th, and coming up on today's show, we are going to really dive into the financial numbers of this Timberwolves offseason. This is an Excel spreadsheets episode. We're going to talk a little more specifically about what the contract numbers would need to be for Julius Randle, Naz Reid, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker for the Wolves to keep all three of them while staying beneath the second apron and everything that comes with that. And that's important to kind of set the groundwork for talking about trades, talking about a Kevin Durant trade. We're going to do that in this episode as well. It's going to come after we put the spreadsheets up there because, as we'll talk about in this episode, the value of a Durant trade, the sense that a Durant trade will or won't make sense, will be tied to whether or not they can keep this current roster together. So yeah, we're gonna unravel a lot here today. I got Kyle Theige here with me. Let's do this, Kyle. Our first off-season pod. What's up?
So excited. Another Excel spreadsheet. I think this is important. I think this for you and I is like this. I know you did exit interviews last week, like that pod with Chris, and that was a really good one. So if you haven't heard some of the comments from the team or from Tim Conley after the season ended, I think that's a good kind of recap to end the season. But for you and I, this is like the first pod of now the offseason and like setting everyone up. There's so many, trades and ideas floating around, and you've heard Shams. What did he say again? This is gonna be the most craziest summer ever. But to get to that point, I think you kind of need to know what you got and to look at the financials and who's on the books and what possible deals for your own guys could look like before you start flirting with people outside of Minnesota. So yeah, I think you might as well just throw it up on the screen. Again, this is a big one. If you're on if you haven't watched the pod on YouTube, go check it out on YouTube. But Dane's got all the colors and the cells and the formatting. So just take it away for the 25-26 Timberwolves.
Yeah. And I'll just say off the top, we're operating with, this new collective bargaining agreement rules and everything that comes with that. I've tried to do some research. I think I'm handling these things and these numbers right or close to right. Kind of the point with some of what we're going to get into today, and I think it'll make sense, is it's about having sort of malleable contracts that lead you up to staying below the second apron line, or when we start talking about Durant, malleable contracts that get put together. I'm trying to operate as much as I can within the rules, but you'll see it's kind of just a guideline. We're estimating numbers on specifically the contracts of Julius Randle, Naz Reid, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. So we'll kind of just be going through the details of this. I just want to get that disclaimer out of the way. I'm trying as hard as I can. If I miss something small, I miss something small. But up on the screen on YouTube, and I know more people listen in podcast version than they do on YouTube, but this one might be helpful to, at least for this first 20 minutes, to look. If you want to see the spreadsheet, it's up on the screen here. And on the spreadsheet, you'll see, I'll just run through these really quickly. The contracts that the players the Wolves currently have under contract. I'll read through them quickly where they're at on their deal. Anthony Edwards is making $45.5 million next season. He has 4 years and $202 million left on his contract. Rudy Gobert is making $35 million next season. He has 3 years and $110 million left in his contract. Julius Randle has a player option for $31 million next season. That's the last year on his deal. Obviously, a big pivot point in this whole offseason for the Wolves. Jaden McDaniels is going to make about $25 million next year. He has 4 years and $110 million left on his deal. Naz Reid has his $15 million player option. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is an unrestricted free agent, so he is not currently under contract at all. Dante DiVincenzo is set to make $12 million next year, has 2 years and $24 million left on his contract. Mike Conley has 1 year and $11 million left on his contract. Rob Dillingham will start year 2 of his deal next season for about $6.5 million. He has 3 years and $22 million left on that rookie contract. Terrence Shannon Jr. set to make $2.7 million next year, has 3 years, $10.5 million left on his contract. Luka Garza has a team option for next season for $2.4 million, 1 year contract. Leonard Miller has a non-guaranteed contract that has 2 years left on it, 2 years, $4.6 million. Jalen Clark has 1 year and $2.2 million left on his contract. Same with Josh Minot there. And then also I threw in the number 17 pick with an estimated salary of $4.2 million and the number 31 pick being set for a second round pick. There's different things they can do there, but I put in $1.7 million to kind of hold a position there. So, Kyle, what we're really doing here is we are trying to fit everything in the first column, the sum of all those salaries, the inclusive salary total you see there, and keep that under the second apron number, which is $207.8 million. As you look at this right now, and we just have the Randle player option up there at $31 million, and you have Reid at $15 million, assuming that player option. The Wolves have about $9.5 million of space left beneath the second apron. Boom, you could just put, if Nickeil would sign for that amount of money, perfect. The Wolves are under the second apron. They have plenty of contracts and all that. But a factor here is we think Nickeil Alexander-Walker is probably going to make more than $9.5 million. So you got to find some sorts of ways to be creative here. And I think the first place to start with is with Naz Reid and that $15 million contract player option that he has for next season. Now, there's two ways that Naz can sign an extension. The first way is he can opt into his player option and then sign a contract extension on top of that. I'll put it on here. Oops, that wasn't right. We'll try that over again. We'll put that there, and so Naz, if we gave him a contract extension for, what would that be, about 4 years, $94 million, that would start after this player option. So that's really big. This is a big number for Naz, but it keeps his player option at $15 million next season. So the question is, hey Naz, will you agree to opt into your player option if we attach 4 years and $26 million, or 4 years and $94 million on top of that in an extension? The other option for him is he can opt out of his player option and sign an extension. But where that number can start at is $19 million next season. That's the highest raise he can get off of his current deal. So so that would be, sorry, what's the number here? A 4-year, $85 million extension, but that is at a $19 million number, which is $4 million for next season, which makes things a little bit trickier, right, Kyle? We got like that number, rather than it being 15 next year, goes to 19, and now that space we have beneath the second apron drops from $9.5 million to $5.5 million. Definitely can't get Nickeil Alexander-Walker for $5.5 million there. So I think I want to start with Naz because the whole premise of keeping all three of them, I think, is contingent upon the idea that Naz opts into his player option for next season and signs that 4-year, damn, I did that again, signs that 4-year, $96 million extension on top of that. We don't know how realistic that is, right? Because Naz can opt out of that player option. He's an unrestricted free agent. Brooklyn can pay him way more money. Detroit has ways to maybe scrape to $17, $18 million. Maybe they'll go through him. Our guy, Jake Fisher, reported yesterday that Naz Reid is on Detroit's radar with that cap space that they can get to. So I would just say, like, the foundation of all this, the idea of keeping all three of them, which is sort of the dream, starts with that idea of, will Naz opt in and sign a 4-year extension on top of his $15 million player option for next season? Because I think we can go from there and even give Julius Randle a big contract on top of his $31 million here. And you're still good. If he signs, if Julius signs what would that be? Like a 3-year, $115 million contract extension on top of his player option, then we're good. Then you still have Nickeil here. And we could even give Nickeil that, we can give him that $14 million number. And sure, you're now $4.4 million over the second apron, but buy Luka Garza, by Josh Minot who are on team options, and there you go. You got 14 players. You got 14 players under contract. If you consider the first 2 picks, you're still under the second apron. There's other ways you can handle that. You could trade the 17th pick, and you have more money. You have more money to play with that way as well. But I think the way to think about, and then I'll pause and take a breath and get your thoughts here. The way to think about keeping all 3 of them, Kyle, is to convince both Naz Reid and Julius Randle to opt into their player option, but add extensions on beyond that. Does that part make sense?
Yeah, this is all I do for work. I forgot we were doing a podcast. I just get spreadsheets on Zoom and look at them all day. So this all makes sense. And I think the starting point here does echo of what Tim said, right? At his exit interview of ideally we'd like to bring everyone back. And there's some, GM, Pobo speak there, but I do, unless you feel differently, I do feel like that is a goal for them, is they would like to try to, for better or worse, run this thing back. And I think, if you ask any specific person, even you or a fan or whatever, like what is the priority of the 3, Naz, Julius, and Nikhil? I think you're going to get a bunch of different answers. But I think in this case, because of his age and whatever his relationships and his story here, and he's the longest, I guess, tenured Timberwolf, I think Naz to me is the starting point. So this all makes sense. I would imagine Tim Conley has had a lot of these conversations. This isn't just, we'll wait till June 25th to figure this out. Talking to Naz, talking to Julius about like, hey, if you opt in, it gives us a little more flexibility to build a contender while also making sure that you get paid. So that all makes sense. And again, when you're looking at it on YouTube and the 25-26 projected salary based on all of the hypotheticals you just listed, can you give me a quick reminder, as we're all learning the new CBA in real time, why this team would like to ideally probably avoid the second apron to not continuously be in it?
Yeah, I mean, it's just to, I think, first and foremost is to avoid paying another $100 million luxury tax payment, as they just paid $92 million in luxury tax, this from this past season. Do they have the green light to pay $100 million or whatever, $50 million in luxury tax again next season? You see a lot of teams that will go in for 1 year. I think will be the pattern, maybe 2 years. So maybe the Wolves do go into it again. And maybe they are willing to, maybe they're willing to go 10 million into the luxury tax payment, or 10 million into the second apron to have that 100, whatever, a big luxury tax payment. And sure, then you can keep all 3 of those guys. But one, which we don't know, is that something that ownership will be cool with again? And then related to that, is that something the front office is cool with? Because there's all these restrictions that come with being in the second apron that would, one, freeze your future draft pick. So 2032 pick would be frozen. There's limits on other trades that they're able to make. They'd only be able to round out the roster with minimum contract players. None of that's like the end of the world, but there are punitive restrictions to being in the second apron. And there's real punishments from a financial standpoint of being in the second apron, always, but, compounding in a way when you're in it for multiple seasons. So we're just kind of, for the sake of this exercise, assuming that the goal is to stay beneath the second apron. I think the kicker is they just can't. If Julius has a path to a much bigger contract for next season than his player option, or if Naz has a path to a bigger contract than that $15 million player option. I think this is doing some hopeful wish casting that Naz would agree to this $15 million number. But I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibilities, because you can give him a decently juicy extension on top of that. And if the market just isn't that great for him, maybe adding 4 years and $94 million, which gets you up to your overall contract being 5 years, 109. I mean, you're on a $100 million contract. Give you a player option in the last season so you can get out again when he'd be 29 years old, still in his prime. get another big deal then when the cap is up. I mean, there's a way you can convince yourself that maybe that is possible. But what is also possible, because we just don't know, is that Brooklyn offers him $28 million for next season and 28, and he signs a huge deal with them. I don't super see the logic in that from Brooklyn's standpoint, but it could happen. Detroit could offer something. Maybe they offer 17 million next year, 19, 21, 23. Okay, now if you're Nas, you're getting more money in a more condensed window than you would be from what the Wolves like. These numbers aren't like, I'm not throwing together what I'm putting out there, the 21 million for the following season on the extension. That isn't like me guessing what the Wolves can offer. That's the max extension that Nas, can sign here. That's the tricky part of where he's at, unless you were to go into cap space, right? They could offer him, they have his bird rights, like they could offer Nas Reid a max contract. They would just need to shed like $80 million in salary or whatever to get below the salary cap so as to be able to give him this type of contract. That's obviously not feasible in this environment. So these are the options that Nas is going to be offered: is opt in, add 496 on top of it, or opt out. And your best offer you can get from the Wolves is 4 years. I think it's $87 million on that one. Again, starting at 19. So this is how it looks like. If you could get him to opt in, you could probably get Nickeil to come back. You can you can trade the 17th overall pick for something, maybe a future draft pick, so you don't take that salary next year. You can waive or opt out of the Garza and Minot deals. You could shed salary to get under that second apron. But it gets hard to be able to do that if Nas's number is bigger, if Julius's number needs to be bigger to retain them. And that's the sliding doors of this thing. If Julius needs $37 million next season, well, then you can't bring back Nas, Nickeil, and Julius at that number. If, they don't even have the means to, but if Nas needs 25 million next season for a starting salary, the Wolves wouldn't, even if they could, they wouldn't be able to fit all of that under the second apron. So I think, which I don't think I've given enough credence to, the idea that it's possible to keep all three of them, just as I get a better feel kind of for the market or idea of what these numbers are exactly. I think it's possible that you could retain all of them. But if one of the deals is much bigger, now you have to start opening up contingency plans if you're Tim Conley and the front office to be like, well, we can't keep all three of them. So now let's start talking about trades, which we can do, whether that's Kevin Durant or somebody else, so as to use those guys differently. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's the big thing, right? Again, this is, I know it might sound redundant, but I think it's really important to keep bringing this up because, the internet is ablaze at this time of year with all the fun hypotheticals and everyone's on different trade machines and stuff. And this new CBA just nukes a lot. Like a lot of the times when someone's like, oh, look at this ESPN trade machine thing that I put together and it's a green check mark. It's like, yeah, but that's actually not legal. Like Bobby Marks just spends most of his time online now being like, that's not legal. That doesn't work. So I think you and I have learned in real time that this is a possibility to thread a needle where you do run it back with all of the main guys. And in this case, it would be Julius and Nas and Nickeil, but they all kind of have to simultaneously work together to get raises or promotions or whatever, while also making sure their buddy stays on as well. Also on the Nas thing, at no point did you say 30 million. So I think that's important to just kind of throw out there because I've seen some crazy numbers get thrown around for Nas Reid that are like damn near impossible. So, and then lastly, on the Brooklyn thing that you keep bringing up, and if people are wondering like, why is Dane highlighting the Brooklyn Nets? It's because this is, again, just so different than 4 or 5 years ago when you would hear like 8 teams have max cap space and they're going to recruit so-and-so out. And, you get all the flight trackers. Almost no one has cap space. The Nets are positioned in a way where they do have some real authentic cap space. Other teams like the Pistons, you said, can make some stuff work. But this isn't going to be like Nas or a Julius, like they opt out and then they're wined and dined by 6 or 7 teams. That's not the new landscape of the NBA. So yeah, would the Nets, throw a big offer at Nas to kind of bring him back home, quote unquote, or do they have other targets they want to get involved in just being a trade, component to maybe acquire more assets and use their cap space that way. That's kind of how smart teams have done it now. Like, we have money, but we'll use it to acquire your lesser pieces and then we'll get a draft pick. So Nas is, to me, like at the head of the snake because of his age. And again, he just costs less than Julius would in a possible extension. But can you talk him into being like, hey, you're underpaid. We both know it. You took, I guess, kind of a discount to stay here in the first place, but will you stay on that $15 million option? And then we'll make sure you're taken care of on the back end. That's going to be, I mean, the same applies to Julius, but that is like the big question, right? As you enter this next offseason.
No, absolutely. And we'll take care of you on the back end. If taking care of you on the back end looks like 4 years, $94 million. If taking care of you on the back end looks like $125 million, they can't, it's
Can't do it.
That's where they're at. And then you start opening up some sign and trade pathways. Like, there are ways that Naz Reid could wind up on a team other than Brooklyn or Detroit. The Wolves would just need to be, what's the word? A facilitator in allowing that to happen, which also might make some sense. We'll keep going on this and we'll dig into some KD trade options. We'll grab our first break here, though. Let you know that today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. Y'all know about Falling Knife. You're going there to watch the playoff games, the regular season games. They are showing those obviously all throughout the season, but we just want to let you know, one, that follow them on Instagram. They got a list of different events that they have going on there every week, trivias, all that sort of more typical brewery stuff. Very fun place to be able to go hang out, during the summer, have some patio beers and all that. But the big thing we want to put on your radar is they are having a draft party at Falling Knife on June 25th at 6 p.m. That's the night of the first round of the draft. I'm going to be at the Wolves facility. So I will not be there at the draft party, but the Crunch Wears No Pants crew is going to be hosting that draft party at Falling Knife Brewing Company on June 25th at 6 p.m. So mark that down. You're looking for something to do for the draft. That's only in like a little over 2 weeks. So yeah, check out Falling Knife all summer long, but specifically on June 25th for that draft party. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Kyle, I was just looked at it quickly this morning. 2 I have for game 3 of the finals. I'm doing 2 less thans. I'm going to say Tyrese Halliburton less than 17.5 points in game 3, and Jalen Williams less than 20.5 points for the Thunder. Neither of those guys have exceeded that threshold in game 1 or game 2. And I think that's just a little bit, I think their scoring ranges in this series are probably a little bit lower than that. We'll see how Oklahoma City adjusts for Tyrese Halliburton and the Pacers, who kind of got something going in the fourth quarter, but largely they've done a good job of stifling him, and same with the Pacers stifling J-Dub on the other side. So I'm rolling with those trends. Do you have anything from Prize Picks for game 3 of the finals?
Yeah, if you keep scrolling, I would take Alex Caruso over or more than uncalled fouls of 9.5. He just keeps hacking people and it never gets called. But no, if you're listening to this on Monday, or maybe you listen to this on Tuesday when it comes out, Taco Tuesday, Prize Picks has all those different little things. They give discounts and stuff. So I'm guessing that you could pair some of Dane's picks with like a discounted player prop for the next game. So check out all those little things and Flex Friday and all those little ways to kind of get some value. So I'm with you on the Halliburton stuff, though. He just hasn't been super aggressive in games 1 and 2, even though he had that game winner. So I like the less than 17.5.
It's kind of anti, right, from last round, where it's like, do you need to be more aggressive, or is this maybe a little bit about what the defense is doing? And the Pacers found a little bit of a way to get him going in the fourth quarter, but we'll see if the Thunder adjust there. So, yep, for all these finals games, this is fun. I was like, I had a demon mode Aaron Wiggins last night. I had my Prize Picks lineup. I love Wiggins. This is fun to do. PrizePicks.com or the Prize Picks app. You can use the promo code Dane for a $50 sign up bonus when you place your first $5 lineup. All right, Kyle, let's talk about a Kevin Durant trade. This is a very interesting situation, just from like a salary cap and a roster standpoint of being in a very difficult, tight spot that the Wolves are in, as we just went through. About every dollar sort of counts for staying under the second apron. There's limitations for what they can and cannot do in what they can offer. They're three very important free agents. And I think in a world where the market plays out in a way very differently than we just went through, and it becomes untenable to retain all three of those guys, you have to consider trading them, or it will be considered to trade them. So I put together just like I sent this to you, just like a basic trade that lines up the salary components of what the Wolves would be sending out versus what the Wolves would be sending out. And the big kicker here for Kevin Durant trades, I would just say for everybody who wants to play around with this, is Kevin Durant makes $54.7 million next season is what his contract is. Normally with trades, right, we're like, hey, if you're close, the trade processes, when you're within 25% of the number, that salary, quote unquote, matches. And that is true. But if the Wolves were to send out like 52 million rather than 54.7, the exact dollar for dollar match, then they become hard capped at the first apron, which is way, way, way lower than the number that they're at right now. So the way to think about any Kevin Durant trade starts with the question of, can I put together outgoing salary that equals exactly $54.7 million? And the Wolves are in a position to be able to do that because they are in a position to be able to sort of choose what Reid and what more specifically Nickeil Alexander-Walker's salary is next season, because they're free agents. These guys would be going out in a trade to Phoenix in this case, or a 3-team trade. But the numbers of their salaries are malleable, and that's what makes this possible. So, for example, what the Wolves could do in a trade is if Julius Randle opts into his player option for $31 million, okay, that's 31 of the 54.7. Reid opts in to his $15 million play option. Okay, we're up to 46. Got 8.7 to go. How do the Wolves get to 8.7? You make Nickeil Alexander-Walker's contract be worth $8.7 million. Now, the way you do that is by signing and trading Nickeil Alexander-Walker to, in this deal, you'd be going to a third team because it's a sign and trade. But if you make Nickeil Alexander-Walker's next contract $17.4 million, I know that seems a little bit high, but just roll with me here for the point of what I'm trying to get to. How it works in a sign and trade, you send out $17.4 million. The money you're sending out only counts as half as much. So 17.4 divided by 2 is 8.7. Again, Julius Randle, 31 million. Reid, 15 million. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 8.7 counting. That's 54.7. You can tweak the exact dollars to match up. I mean, technically Durant's is $54,708,609. You can make that work by tweaking, again, Nickeil's malleable contract to equal that exactly. Now, does that sound like a lot to be trading Julius Randle, Reid, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker in a trade? Yes. You look at the names of those guys, but those are also three players who are free agents. So they don't necessarily like hold a real asset value to you right now, right? Because Nas can leave. Nickeil can leave. Julius can leave. They have legs here that makes it so it's not like, if we put Donte DiVincenzo in this trade, for example, which you could do, you could make him be the Nas money instead or something like that. We know with Donte, his contract is more defined. He has 2 years and $24 million left on that contract. That's a really good value contract. If Donte DiVincenzo was a free agent this summer, he'd get a lot more than $12 million, right? So that's a valuable contract. Whereas in theory, Reid's contract, Julius Randle's contract, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker's contract is going to come at what their market rate is, which is theoretically, right, a net neutral asset. You're not really sending out something juicy again, like a DiVincenzo trade or contract might be. Obviously, if you put Jaden McDaniels in that trade, that'd be a really juicy player under contract type of deal that would, carry some more asset value there. So there's different ways. Again, you could put DiVincenzo in there. You could put, Rudy, he has 3 years, that $110 million left on his contract. He could be 35 of the 54.7. You could put Conley's 11 in there. There's all these different ways, provided you're able to use Alexander Walker's contract malleably, that's a word, to kind of make up the remaining space to equal $54.7 million. This sounds complicated, but this is actually a gift in a way that the Wolves have of some flexibility here that makes them be able to make that 100% salary match with Durant at $54.7 million, which logistically makes this a lot less difficult than I think I would have thought earlier. It just is a kind of way that this new collective bargaining agreement is breaking in a way that is helpful for the Wolves. If you agree with the premise that trading for Kevin Durant is as a helpful step there. Are you tracking me thus far on that?
Can we mix in a water quick?
Yeah.
Just to thank. Good job. On brand. What I have learned in this, and I've actually asked someone who knows way more about this than myself, but one of the things we're learning about the new CBA and what you just articulated to me, because as you were throwing all those numbers at me and I was looking at your historically deep email you sent me, I also went to Spot Track and was like, what's Cat's contract? And he's supposed to make $53.142 million next season. And the only reason I'm asking that is because if you do pull yourself out of it and you think about a Kevin Durant trade, right? Kevin Durant could potentially have a lot of suitors. Teams that have a lot of picks. Does Phoenix want that? Teams that have good players. In this situation like the Wolves, where you can give me like 2 or 3 things, right? Or like a team like the Knicks, who have also been rumored in a Kevin Durant trade. And that would just kind of be like Cat and a minimum guy to make that number work. The big, what did you say? $54.708 million.
Yep.
Isn't the new CBA one of the kind of cheat codes or the way teams are learning to have, you're always going to have your franchise guy or two, right? Your max contract guy. But if that, like, Cat's not the Knicks franchise guy, it is nice to have smaller pieces that then you can kind of put together, right? And I guess what I'm trying to say to you is a year removed or a year-ish removed from the Cat trade, whatever you think about the players, or they both went to the conference finals, the Wolves are in a better spot, are they not, by having smaller pieces to kind of throw together than they would be just to have one fat $54 million contract?
This is the financial flexibility that they were talking about when they talked about a value of the trade being financial flexibility, in addition to getting Julius Randle, which they thought would be a helpful piece and proved to largely be that. In addition to the piece, the Dante DiVincenzo contract that they got, that at the time was 3 years, $36 million, and the Detroit first round pick that was lottery protected that they ended up getting in this deal. It's being able to kind of piece things together. I would say, though, more specifically than even having small contracts to put together, a really important thing is having like a contract that you can mold to a specific number. And I'll use Leonard Miller as an example. Leonard Miller is on a $2.2 million contract next season. $1.1 million of that is guaranteed, half of it. If the Wolves, for some reason, to get to $54.7 million, need to have a $1.5 million is the gap that's left there, well, they can just guarantee Leonard Miller's contract, if I'm understanding this correctly, to 1.5, and there you go. Now Leonard Miller is traded out to make that fit. So I think what we'll see in this offseason, Wolves or otherwise, is a lot of people taking advantage of those, of specifically non-guaranteed contracts, or contracts that don't have specific numbers already set in stone to them, so that they're malleable to be able to match up numbers. Again, the term is 100% salary match that you would need to be doing there. To the Knicks, that's what the Knicks did to get Cat. Remember all the weird, like they sent some guys to Charlotte for a week and gave some guy who had already signed overseas like $1 million. That's what they were doing. They were finding all of these ways to be like, we need these numbers to work. I mean, it wasn't exactly the same situation, but there's real value, especially when you're at a financial spot like the Wolves are, like the Knicks are, up close to the second apron, of having sort of some of that flexibility to do so. But yes, to your bigger question about the I went on a different pod last week, and I was with Yossi Goslin, who's a really good salary cap
really
guy.
Good.
But I was really surprised talking to him about it. He's like, no, I think that's bad. I would have rather have had Cat than, winding up trading Cat away for Randle and DiVincenzo only to turn them into Kevin Durant a year down the line. I don't agree with that because I kind of agree with the premise of the Cat trade in the first place, which was for financial flexibility. Even if they make this Kevin Durant trade and it blows up miserably and he leaves after a season, you're still in a position at that time where you do not have Cat at what are those last 2 years of his contract, 57 and 61.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a big part of this was future financial flexibility that they were talking about. And that's what they got off of with Cat. And that's what even trading for Kevin Durant would do. Again, it's a gamble on Durant to some extent, just given his age and health history and all that. But even if that goes wrong, you still kind of retain that financial flexibility down the line. Would it come at the cost of trading Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander, Julius Randle, some combination of players? Yes, there would be a cost associated to that. But as we laid out at the beginning, if you already know that you are losing one or two of those players to another team because you literally can't afford to retain them on your team, now you're just being resourceful and you're being like, hey, man, great. We're really glad that Orlando wants to give Nickeil Alexander-Walker a $17 million, whatever, contract. Good for him. We can't pay him that much money, but we're going to now use that contract resourcefully in a sign and trade, with Orlando to get us to this point so we can bring back a real player. And in this example, Kevin Durant.
Yeah, you did a really fun pod last week that if you like spreadsheets and geeking out over some of this stuff, everyone should go listen to that. I think Dane tweeted it out. But just confirmation bias, my friend who works for the Blazers explained it to me of like, you want the smaller pieces. Like, he was over last week and we have this sectional and it's a 4-piece sectional. And he goes, that was just a lot easier to move up your stairs than a 1-piece sectional. He goes, that's the CBA now. It is just so much harder.
That's so good.
It is so much harder to move one whole sectional up the stairs than it is in 4 pieces. So I think the Wolves, again, did they win the trade? Whatever. But they now have the thing that they did promise that late Friday night, right? Like, one of the things we want from this trade is financial flexibility. And as you have just highlighted, they have that. Now, do you want to just talk about the player a little bit? Like, do you want
let me ask you, let's do that. We're going to have to take another break at some point. But before we get to that, how do you just feel about the outgoing pieces of, let's assume, hey, I'm Kyle and I like Kevin Durant, which I have a feeling I love this move and all that. Let's just assume that and you're like, okay, I think this would be a good idea. How do we feel about losing in this example or all 3 of the free agents for him? How do you sort of process that idea of like, okay, Durant is in, but Randle, Reid, and Alexander Walker are out, knowing even in your head that like, well, I was going to probably need to lose 1 or maybe even 2 of those guys anyways. I know that it's hard because I'm not giving you a specific example, but I think you kind of get what I'm getting at. Just that feeling of, all right, so Naz and Nickeil aren't on the team anymore. Like that didn't always feel like it was going to be the way that it was. How would that feel to you?
It would have felt different 8 years ago when you and I started covering this team. I think as you get older, different things excite you and get you happy in life. And I like sustainability. I like flexibility. I like depth. This Kevin Durant situation to me is, and I'm like probably in the minority here, it is the meme of the guy setting up the dominoes and the first little domino, and then it gets to this big domino. If you want my real opinion, I think this is the first domino. If you do that and you lose those 3 guys and you have to maybe send out a pick or something towards the inevitability of Ant leaving. I just don't like it. Like what you just showed me on Excel, and it makes so much sense, is that you essentially, in this scenario, if it's Kevin Durant, traded Cat for Durant. Pretty much, right? Like maybe there's some extension, like maybe throw Naz in there too, but you then carve out this must-win window. I mean, the one number that you didn't mention throughout all of this is 37, and that's how old Kevin Durant is. and he's probably aging gracefully, and he's still a bucket getter. So I understand he will solve some of your late game execution stuff. He's a floor spacer. I don't know if OKC could load up on Ant the way they did if Kevin Durant's out there. So I see some of the basketball stuff. I also watch a lot of other basketball games, and I watched him play 67, I think, games for the Suns last year on a team that finished 11th in the West. So if you make a move like this and you get rid of a guy like Nikhil who's 26 or a guy like Nas who's 25 and seem to have been a part of this culture for a guy, yes, KD, I'm Kevin Durant, you know who I am. I love all that stuff. But you're also getting someone who has not always been the happiest anywhere he's gone. And I think that stuff factors into, are you ready now to be in an 18-month, 24-month window where like we have to win a title? And I'm not trying to pass the buck, because I do think now after back-to-back conference finals runs, if you told me next year that the Wolves made the conference finals again and lost in 5, I would call that a disappointment. Like now you are at a point now where you need to find, as I've said before, you're 8.5. You need to get to 9. How do you get to 10? Like the Ant window is coming, but this seems like just blowing out Kool-Aid Man style the wall and being like, oh yeah, like we're winning the title now. And I don't know if giving up all those other players and banking on guys that we like Jalen Clark, who your spreadsheet reminded me that he is in the final year of his deal because he's a smart cookie, but like he is an unrestricted free agent next summer, right? Like
no, restricted actually. Restricted.
Oh, he is? Okay.
Restricted.
Okay.
Yep.
We
yep.
got
but only under contract for a year. So, I mean, it's still,
and they have young guys. They have Rob and they have Terrence, and those guys have to, with Chris Finch clearly being the coach for next season, they have to get more run. But I'm just telling you, I don't assume that I'm in the pro Durant thing, because I just think you are now bringing back again that lack of financial flexibility. You're tied to him for the $54 million number. He's also a free agent next summer. So maybe that gets you some flexibility if he leaves. But I'm not down with giving up all this depth of guys who have proven to be very important for one swing at this thing that, yes, it could get you to 9, but you're also kidding yourself if you don't think it could bring you to 6.
Yeah, I think what we need to do then is talk about some trades that are different players to get us to 54.7, because I'd be curious to see how you would feel if it wasn't Julius, Nas, and Nikhil as the 3 going out, that I was just using largely as an example to literally to make the money work. So we'll come back. We'll do some of that. Let's grab another break here. Today's show is brought to you by Storyworth. And I think this is actually a really cool idea. You need a last minute Father's Day gift. You probably, when your dad has told you stories over the course of the time, you might have forgot them. Some of them are like, all right, I tuned this out. I think, and Kyle, I think you'd echo this too. As you get older and you get to know your parents more, like as an adult, you listen a little bit closer, and you want to remember your parents' memories, and that's what Storyworth Memoirs is. It's a way to capture your dad's favorite memories for your family to keep forever. Makes a great Father's Day gift. Again, just they send them different email questions every week that, did you ever get into trouble in school? What were your favorite sports growing up? Different sort of questions to varying degrees of, I guess, seriousness. But your loved one just gets to kind of respond to that email with the story. They can respond typing it. They can record it. Then Storyworth can transcribe it for you. And it all ends up giving you an emailed copy of the answers, but also compiles all these answers and stories and photos into a beautiful hardcover book. The photos are printed in color, and all the stories are in there as well. I think it's a really cool, again, Father's Day type gift, or really for anybody in your life, your parents, grandparents, whatever it might be. Give the dads in your life a unique, heartfelt gift you'll all cherish for years at Storyworth. And right now, you can save $15 during their Father's Day sale when you go to storyworth.com/DaneMoore. That's Storyworth, STORYWORTH.com/DaneMoore to save $15 on your order. Today's show is also brought to you by PXG, and the time has come. It's summertime, time to get some new golf clubs. And that means one thing: heading over to your local PXG store for a fitting. They make the best golf clubs, period. I've told you all, I went over to the PXG store in the Southdale Mall. I think it was back in April. And how it worked is they took me into their golf simulator, kind of eye test fitted me, had me take some cuts from there. The technology they used was able to basically tell why I wasn't hitting it straight. Was I behind it? Club face was open, the length, whatever it was. And then they were just able to, make some changes to the club. And I started hitting it straight. It was like what normally the rare occasion that I golf, normally takes me like 5 holes to figure out how to hit it straight. This literally took 5 minutes. And that's why the fastest way to improve your performance on the golf course is a PXG fitting. PXG fitters, the people who fit you, are highly trained. They're incredibly experienced and have a deep understanding of how to optimize your clubs to get the most out of your swing. They really are. It was fun. It was fun going in there to try out the fitting. You can schedule your fitting today, and for a limited time, you can save up to 20% on your entire order. Head over to pxg.com/DaneMoore. That's pxg.com/DaneMoore to save up to 20% on your entire order. pxg.com/DaneMoore. Restrictions apply. See site for details. I am going golfing this weekend, Kyle. Proud of me?
I'm very proud. I was going to say that Storyworth thing is really cool. And just to highlight that, yes, Father's Day is coming up. Thanks for reminding me. I just remembered that 3 minutes ago. But it's also big for any other family members too. I'm actually doing it. That's like my grandma had a heart attack during the Lakers series. And you never think about it until it's too late. So if you have older, grandparents or parents or anyone that's going through some stuff, to get those stories, that is super, super valuable. And the way that Storyworth does it is really cool. So not to take away from the golf thing, because I am very happy for you. And we'll see if you hit them straight when you're outside, because it's one thing to hit them straight inside, but when you're outside. Let's go back to this Durant thing, or just trades in general.
Okay. So what I want to push back on your what you said before the break, not because I necessarily disagree with it. I don't even think I firmly have my own, how good would Kevin Durant be opinion formed. But I think what you're doing and what you're saying a little bit, and I think I'm not butchering this term, is ignoring some of the sunk costs. So that'd be the sunk cost fallacy, right? Mm-hmm. Of if you are going to be losing, if you know you are going to be losing Naz Reid to free agency, that he will not sign either of those extensions that you talk to him about that would make this work, the opting into the player option, or even the starting at $19 million next season, then he is gone. And we can't, it would be reductive then to be all right, you traded Cat for KD, and along the way you lost Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid. You lose guys along the way, no matter what, as they exceed the values of their contracts. 2 seasons ago, Nickeil Alexander-Walker signed a 2-year, $9 million contract. He massively exceeded that. And what kind of happens along the way, like Bruce Brown in Denver, right, is all right, we loved you at 4.5. We'd love to have you even at 14, but the Pacers offered 22, some of that, and they're just gone. And that could happen with Naz too. Again, we don't know some of these market factors and different things associated. I'm only bringing up the premise of a KD trade after we go through the door that says, hey, you cannot retain all 3 of Randle, Reid, and Alexander Walker. If that door opens and they get pushed into it, then I think you need to start considering a Durant trade. Maybe it's not those 3 pieces. Maybe you're nope, I would rather have it be a trade where the money going out is letting go of the Utah experience, right? Maybe it's Rudy at 35, Mike at 11. Okay, we're at 46. And now put in Garza and Minot. What did I say before there? We had 46, so that's another, so up to 50, and now you need 54.7. Okay, Nickeil sign and trade for $11 million. Boom, you're at that 54.7. Does that change your mind if it's different pieces? If it's different pieces going out as the foundational player contracts that are going out, does that change your mind on it?
No.
Okay.
But because I'm going back to this idea of you've now outlined how all of this can work, and I'm with you, and I'm probably blindly not looking at the possibility of, well, if you're going to lose that anyway, don't you want to at least try to recoup some value? Do you think, and again, I'm putting you on the spot now because this is not fair, but do you think the hypothetical of losing 2 to 3 rotation players, let's say 3, for Kevin Durant makes them like a title contender or elevates them from that 8.5 to that 9 I'm talking about. Because my concern is, and maybe this is the dynasty fantasy football in me, it's like, so Ant turns 24 in August and Durant turns 37 in September. By the time Ant is at this Shea window, and I'm watching the finals, right? And Shea is the best player in the world, or at least in the finals, and MVP and all that stuff. 2-3 years from now, that's when Ant's going to get to that window. Is Durant on the team? Right? So like, are you, and that's my concern with, like, I'm not saying Naz Reid is the second best player on a title contender or third best even sometimes, but are you putting yourself in a window where you're trying to kind of put the cart before the horse? And they did that, I guess, with the Gobert trade to an extent, and it expedited Ant's timeline. And I was a big fan of that and his maturity. I don't want him to be LaMelo Ball on bad teams. I'm just saying, you are now in any Durant trade, whoever the pieces that go out, including draft picks or a Rob or whatever you make it work, you are saying we now have thrown ourselves into the Thunder, Celtics, or like we have to win a title in the next 2 or 3 years. Because my fear is if you don't, and I am risk averse, but I also think this franchise now needs to embrace real expectations at all levels, is that when Ant is finally ready to possibly be the guy in the league, is he going to look around and be like, you guys mortgaged all these assets a couple of years ago, and now like I'm a 27-year-old, but I'm on the Giannis path of like, we're just running out of assets. And that's a real concern for me.
Yeah, I hear that. Again, I'll go devil's advocate of, you don't make the Durant trade, what does 2 years from now look like anyways? You know what I'm saying? Like, is it going to be a good situation if, rather than making this Durant trade, you've given Randle that 3-year, $115 million extension that I put up there, and 2 years from now, I don't know, what did I have it at? I had Randle at $39 million, you know, like, and he's 32. There's other, like, the current pastures aren't necessarily perfectly green either down the line. And I think like a little bit of a positive trapdoor is, it's just like, well, if the Durant thing doesn't work, then it does just fall off the books, and, or maybe you sign and trade it somewhere else, do something. I hear what you're saying. I hear being scared of the Giannis situation, of the teams that have kind of flushed assets along the way to put a contender around them. The Wolves are not doing that like irresponsibly. I think if we look at the trades that they've done, you know, even if we were, you know, like, oh, a lot of picks you traded in the Gobert trade, you can't really hate on it. You know, the Western Conference Finals, the Randle trade. Like, I'm just saying, like, I don't know if I don't know if 2 years from now with Ant looks good no matter what. I'm not saying that to be overly negative or anything like that.
No.
I'm just saying, like, part of the cost of unloading a grip of picks when Ant was 21 was that you went for a little bit more of a win now angle than waiting until Ant was in his prime or SGA age. Because, I mean, and there's so many transaction windows and stuff to come until then, and the Wolves could be positioned in a good place with Ant at 26. I'm not saying that's not possible, but I do think they don't make a Durant trade, or they don't make an all-in trade like that. And if we could fast forward and compare these two situations in 2027, you'd be like, I'm not sure if you're in a great roster construction around him standpoint either way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good pushback. The only pushback to the pushback is that 2 years from now, if it hasn't fully worked out and you take the Durant path and now he is on the NBA on ESPN desk with Charles Barkley and Stephen A. Smith, you're fucked. Whereas in my path, it's like 2 years from now, like you got Naz Reid on the third year of he's making $21 million in 2027, and the whole world, like, that's probably a really good deal.
Yep.
And he'll be 27 or 28, like in his prime. And you'll have Nikhil at like a 29-year-old making $14 million. Like, that seems like an easier contract to move. So I am admittedly very risk averse, but I also think that you have to do what's necessary to get one title. I mean, this is a big picture thing, but like, if you don't win one title in the Anthony Edwards window, it is a failure. And I think those are conversations that need to start. Like, okay, man, he's made it now twice in a row, like Final Four. You do need to set the next level, the next timeline of what is good for Ant. I'm just simply saying that in this situation, it does, basketball for dummies, feel like you traded Cat essentially for Durant in this hypothetical. You have lowered the amount of years that player will be here. And is that the best path to try to elevate yourself? I mean, I'm just watching these finals again, and it's like how many 38-year-olds are out on the court?
Yeah, it does depend to get to the reductive Cat for KD sort of thing of what is the trade? What is like, what is the trade? And my biggest pushback on a KD trade would be, are there a lot of assets, draft picks that are needing to go into this? Not a lot, even some, in addition to making the $54.7 million work. Like, do you need to, all right, we did the Julius, Nas, and Nikhil thing. They add up to 54.7, but Phoenix goes, nope, we're still not doing it without multiple first-round picks coming to us. Again, is that stupid? Maybe, but if that's what the Durant market is, that's what the Durant market is. And now you've got to trade the Detroit pick. Okay, well, that's a pretty important leg of the value of the Cat trade, right? And that's in there. Now we are more doing, Cat for KD, but is that draft pick not in there? Can they keep DiVincenzo? Because then it's wrong to be like,
is Rob in there?
KD.
Yeah, is Rob in there?
Right, sure. Whatever it is. I just don't think we could say, okay, Cat became KD if they still have DiVincenzo and the Detroit pick in the coffers. Because that was, at the time, those were the real standout asset values in the Cat trade. Randle was a good player, but largely salary ballast, to make that happen there. So it's complicated, man. It depends what the trade is. It depends how many draft picks are going out in it. Can I see a world in where there's a trade there that makes a lot of sense to me? Yes, but provided they cannot just run it back and contain the roster as currently constructed. My take would be, if you can keep Randle, Reid, and Alexander Walker at the numbers that we listed at the beginning of this episode while staying under the second apron, then I would say don't mess around with the Durant trade. Don't incur that risk if there isn't a cost associated with it. If there is a known cost of you are losing Naz Reid, then you got to probably consider this a little bit. And to a lesser cost, if you are losing Nikhil Alexander Walker, we got to take a meeting about what a KD trade looks like and what level of assets we're comfortable with. And they need to do the prep work that I haven't done, that you haven't done, of really, really think about how good will a KD and Ant pairing be from basketball standpoint. From a what does that mean? What value does that have to Rudy if he's still on the team, to Conley if he's still on the team, to whatever it is? You got to look at these. You got to look at these things more globally, and not you, but that's what I'm just reminding myself of in this. I think it's good to push back on the idea of like, okay, Dane, I know you're saying Kevin Durant, but this is not the Kevin Durant I've been seeing in Instagram highlights from the Thunder days in 2012. Last time the Thunder were in the finals, this is a different player. It's a different thing. And because he's 37, though, that might be the reason that they're able to get him without trading out any draft picks. Again, we don't know that, but if that world exists, I do think it needs to be explored.
And two other things when it comes to this, and then I think I wanted to set you up for any other trade fodder, is that Kevin Durant is on the final year of his contract. So he will be an unrestricted free agent in the summer of 2026. And he's just going to have a lot of leverage in where he goes. So yes, there are teams like the Rockets or teams like the Spurs that have way more draft capital, or even like the Rockets' young players that they could throw into the mix. No one really knows what Phoenix wants. No one really knows what Phoenix is doing in general. There's that connection there between the new owner of the Suns, Mandishbia, and the new owner of the Wolves, Alex Rodriguez. But again, until we kind of figure out what Durant wants and where he wants to go, I think he'll play a big part in this. We're an hour in. You showed the spreadsheet. We've mentioned a lot of guys. I just got to ask you, because it sets up for the Durant thing, but it also sets up for any possible other big moves you could create online. Do you think, and context matters, do you think Jaden McDaniels is untouchable? in a trade.
In a KD trade?
Let's just say
trade.
in any trade for now.
I mean, if it was I haven't really thought about this. If it was Giannis, I mean,
then you throw him in.
But that opens it up. Well, maybe. I mean, I'm not even saying for sure. But yeah, probably. I'm considering it there. I'm not in the many examples of trades I sent you to make this 54.7 million work. Jaden McDaniels' number doesn't come up in there at all. And I don't think that part of it makes sense. I actually didn't even put Dillingham in there. I don't think, or maybe one of them I did to you that I sent. I think this is more the idea of, can we send out some of our getting older players for an older player that's better than our getting older players? But yeah, you start talking about McDaniels. No. I mean, then I want to see Giannis coming back, to use the current market of guys. And even with Dillingham, you know, I know he didn't have much of an opportunity this year, but that's the 8th overall pick. You really invested in him. He makes sense, like, from a style of player next to Ant and a point guard need that this team has. I would be cautious with what trades I would put him in. Not the degree of caution that I would apply to McDaniels, because, you know, I'm looking at that McDaniels number now. Was that 4? Yeah, he's got 4 years, 110 left on his deal when he's 24 right now. I mean, that's a pretty good number for him, knowing what we know Jaden McDaniels already is, and believing what you and I believe about the untapped offensive ceiling that Jaden isn't all the way into yet.
That means a lot. Thank you. I don't think anyone on this team is untouchable, is kind of my point, other than Ant. But if you're going to bring up a name like Jaden or something, it really has to be for like those upper echelon guys. And that's just, again, yes, I too have watched the Kevin Durant highlights of his time in Golden State and in OKC, but that is not the guy that you are acquiring. So, but like, I guess the middle ground, right, of, while we're on this topic really quick, and I'm not putting you on the spot with numbers, but Kevin Durant over here, Giannis over here, in the middle is kind of like maybe like a Darius Garland, you know? Like, would you, just asking you again, like, would you throw Jaden into that type of situation? Or are you saying I'm only keeping that piece for literally one of those top 5, 10 guys?
Yeah, the latter, the top 5, top 10 guys. Yeah, and you know, Garland's contract is a big number. I haven't spent time looking into that like I did with KD. I mean, I don't dislike Darius Garland. I just put Darius Garland in the sort of Cat and Julius Randle bucket of really good fringe all NBA players when they're having a great season, but have elements of their game that are going to let you down. You know, we know what those are with Cat defensively. We know that Julius Randle is kind of matchup and rhythm specific. Darius Garland, given his size, you know, and some of his defensive, just his size and what he can do defensively, I think there's some limitations there with him as well. Doesn't make him not a really good player to have. Doesn't make him not a good deal on the contract that he's on, or a fine deal that the contract that he's on. It's just not one of those like game breakers. And you bring in Giannis and you're like, there's no baggage here. This is the second or third best player in the world. That sounds like a really high threshold to hold trading Jaden McDaniels to. So I don't totally love that coming out of my mouth, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm just to your wait and see sort of thing. And a couple years down the line, like, yeah, I am very much I do want to see Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards both on this team together and see where they're at when they are 26 years old, 2-3 years down the line from now. And I don't know, that doesn't totally make sense to liquidate for me. I'm more into the idea of making an aggressive trade by using the older players who still have value. Rudy, I think, still has value on that contract. I think DiVincenzo is clearly a positive asset value on his 2-year, $24 million contract. You want to throw the Detroit pick in there, the number 31 or whatever. Start talking about trades like that. And does that get you in the Darius Garland business? Then sure, let's do that podcast. I think the Wolves have other ways to incentivize a team to trade for, a top 25, 30 player in the league, like Garland level, level player without needing to put in, the full on dream package. And I would assume Cleveland would ask for the full on dream package, that's a different, they have a different set of current circumstances than Phoenix does. The Wolves are in a pretty good leverage spot here with KD that I think they don't have, with Garland there. Let me grab another break and then we'll wrap this up with one final segment. Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. And we know there is often a stigma surrounding mental health. And with that, it is not uncommon at all that people deny themselves acknowledgement of mental health struggles. This is particularly true with men. Over 6 million men in the U.S. suffer from depression every year, and it's often undiagnosed. It is okay to struggle. Real strength comes from opening up about what you're carrying and doing something about it so you can be at your best for yourself and everyone in your life. That's been my experience with therapy. A little you time with your therapist can make for much happier and healthier experiences with everyone else in your life. And with over 35,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. It's really convenient too. You can join a session with a therapist at the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/DaneMoore. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/DaneMoore. Today's show is also brought to you by Manscaped. And a couple months ago, Manscaped sent me a beard trimmer. And I actually haven't used a razor on my face or neck since then because I've been using the Chairman Pro from Manscaped. For me, it's super helpful cleaning up my beard whenever I want, however long my beard is. And, I can do so without irritating my neck, just with one of the foil shaver they have on there. And we want to put this on your radar with Father's Day just around the corner. Let's be honest, your dad probably does not need another coffee mug or pair of socks. It's time to give him something he'll actually use. The Chairman Pro from Manscaped is the perfect Father's Day gift for the dad who deserves to look and feel his best. Again, this isn't just any razor. The Chairman Pro is a high-tech, data-approved grooming upgrade for his face and neck. It's an electric face shaver that can tackle up to 5 days of growth and features 2 interchangeable blade heads. Have him join over 12 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and use code DaneMoore for 15% off your entire order at manscaped.com. Get your dad a Father's Day gift he'll actually use and get the Chairman Pro for 15% off with code DaneMoore at manscaped.com. That's 15% off your entire order with code DaneMoore at manscaped.com. Or if you need it today, last minute gift, you can find Manscaped at a store near you.
I was doing some manscaping this weekend before the pool. So I'm like company man. I just use all the products that sponsor the show, but really, really good products. And then again, the better health stuff too is I know we've transitioned into June, but it's always tough times going on. So if you want to try some of that stuff, I think it's really, really beneficial. So back to, I kind of wanted to close down the spreadsheet. I mean, again, if you haven't checked out YouTube yet, you can screenshot Dane's spreadsheet. It has it all there. But the one thing I think we kind of glossed over, or just to clear up, because we are 2 weeks away from the draft. And by the way, the draft is 2 nights, which you reminded me of this morning. Mm-hmm. But the 17th pick via Detroit, the 31st pick, aka the first pick in the second round via Utah, maybe. Can they trade those picks? Or is that more of like they would have to draft on draft night type thing? You know what I mean? Like kind of putting you on the spot again. And just how does that work in the grand schemes of things? Do you know off the top of your head?
I think those would be on draft. So it's interesting, like Nas and I believe Julius, their player options are like June 28th or 29th or something like that. So they can opt into those before. Okay. And I think it could work to do it, but it could also be, if I'm wrong on that, it could also just be one of those situations where like the deal gets reported and then, you wait until there's that moratorium. The Jarrett Culver experience. You wait until like July 7th and then the deal becomes official and you have that weird, awkward, it's like the off-season version of like wearing the wrong hat at the draft. There there could be some of that's going on. I do think just like in general though, that 17 pick, as I was going through those numbers, I guess I'll just throw this back up there quickly, of like the way that pick costs, that pick costs like $4.2 million, the 17 pick. That's a lot more than a minimum contract.
Mm-hmm.
It might make sense to just move that pick if you're the Wolves in a trade for a player, or even just, can you trade that for a future first or future something so you have assets down the line?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they love somebody at 17, take somebody at 17. I'm just saying, I don't think they need 17 and 31 both. To, just given that they are a team with a lot of depth, a lot of young, talent. Tim Conley said at his end of season interview, he's like, yeah, I think there's players were interested at 17 and 31, but they would come in behind. He listed off Rob Dillingham, Terrence Shannon Jr., Jan Clark, even Josh Minot. Like, this team just, to me, does not need 2 picks between 17 and 31. So to that end, trading one of them makes a ton of sense. Let's trade the one that costs 4.2, that would have a first-year salary of 4.2, and tighten you up against the second apron with whatever you're doing with Nickeil and Julius and Nas. I don't know. I just think the numbers here are pushing towards the idea that maybe they don't need this 17th pick to, use it in a trade, or even trade it for a future first or something like that. So you have that asset to use at the deadline, like a season, next season down the road or whatever it might be. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I just wanted to ask, because I think that's a big talking point over the next couple of weeks. Like, I know Tyler Metcalf shared his no ceilings draft guide, and like starting to get into the draft a little bit and starting to familiarize myself with these names. But also, as Tim Conley said at his exit interview, one of the interesting things to me was like, yeah, the gap between 17 and 31, we kind of we don't see a big difference between some of those guys. So maybe you do, if you're trying to crunch all these numbers to make it all work, and you trade back from a 17 to a 25. I mean, Tim Conley has traded a lot in these drafts since he got here, right? Even like the whole Wendell Moore, Walker Kessler thing. So yeah, I think that's going to also be fascinating, but I just don't want to overlook or gloss over the fact that now that the Wolves are like a conference finals team, usually you and I would be doing draft stuff for 2 months. Like, they do have 2 picks, however they decide to use them. Whether they add more young talent, they kind of kick the can down the road to be like, we'll save that asset for, what you and I were talking about, 2027 or whatever. Those are big assets for a team that has been asset deprived. And I just think it's gonna be fascinating to see what they do with those 2 things. So that is the scenario. That is, again, Nas Reid, I think, was kind of the emphasis of this pod, but we kind of already know the Julius stuff in his $31 million option. Can I throw it to the guy that we didn't talk about much, but I've been thinking about a lot lately? Because I'm watching these finals, and I'm watching what OKC does, and I'm watching what the Pacers do. 2 good games, or maybe 1.5 good games so far. And I just keep coming back to, we all just assume that Nickeil's gone because he's like an unrestricted free agent, and he's probably going to go get a bigger payday somewhere. But as you've showed me now, there is a world where you can run it all back. I don't think I'm super keen on having the exact same roster next year, unless there's promises made to certain guys of like, hey, like maybe Rob starts now or Mike's off the bench. But my thing is I watch the finals, Dane, and I just think like Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a finals player, even though his shot sometimes isn't there. And I just don't know if we should assume that just letting him go and filling his minutes with Jalen Clark is, I don't know. I would miss Nickeil Alexander-Walker if he were to just walk out the door in a couple weeks.
Yeah, that's what I think is like so interesting about doing any of this offseason stuff, is like there's just so many different like butterfly effects to any of these sort of things. It's like the first thing we showed is this world where Julius opts in to 31, maybe gets an extension. Nas opts into 15, maybe gets an extension on top of that, and Nickeil signs for 14. Like that should work. That would work to be able to stay under the number if they do some other things. And then I think that opens up a whole new universe that is like, okay, we did quote unquote run it back from we retained everyone. Now we have them retained. Is this the roster that we want to have?
Exactly.
Because then you could start trading off of that, of like, well, maybe, maybe the vision has changed and you no longer feel the need to have Rudy Gobert on your team for the defensive purposes that he was brought in and all the many great things that Rudy did for his team. But maybe you're ready to move off of that. Okay, cool. We actually went through this door that allowed us to keep both Julius Randle and Naz Reid. That's two bigs, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Does it now make sense to trade Rudy Gobert in some sort of deals, maybe some sort of multi-team trade, where you're getting another center back? Because I do think if they were to trade Rudy Gobert, the defense, forget about the defense that's been happening for the last 2 years, is not going to be the same thing anymore. Do you get another center from somewhere else that there's just a world of possibilities. And I do think that the Nickeil staying part of things and those worlds have not been, given as much air because it is logical. Like you're saying, be Terrence Shannon Jr., Jalen Clark. Like I hear that. And that is probably the most likely best path. But sometimes the best path is like a 60% chance and the little less good path is 40% chance. Maybe the 40% chance path is what they get on. And you have Nickeil there. Like that's still 40% of your possibilities here. And I don't know. Because I feel the same way. I've been saying for like 2 years, my high end Nickeil Alexander-Walker comp is Alex Caruso. In just kind of what he brings, and obviously whatever. I'm not going to even qualify any of that. Because I feel the same thing that you do. I feel like Nickeil is a playoff player, is all those things, and a great guy to be coming off of your bench. And letting him go isn't that awesome. Okay, cool. Now Shannon Jr. and Jalen Clark get an opportunity. Like we like those guys, but yeah, it's not the same thing. And it's almost certainly not better than the incumbent situation, which is you have Nickeil Alexander-Walker and both of those guys there. So yeah, man, I think there is fair and interesting conversations to be had about trades with this team and losing players with this team that are not limited to Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I don't think it's irresponsible or out of line to be like, what would a Dante DiVincenzo trade look like? What would a Rudy Gobert trade look like? What would a Rob Dillingham, even, we said we're protecting the younger guys a little bit. I just think this is the first door you got to walk through, is figure out, can you retain those guys? And if you can, then it doesn't mean you're just running it back again. You're entering then July with okay, we retain them all. Now, do we believe this roster can go from an 8.5 to a 9, like you said, or does it need another trade? And another trade could come on top of that or after the fact, even if it's not a Kevin Durant trade.
But big picture, right? Just a little quick minute segment here of state of the franchise or whatever. It is crazy to me as we wake up, on June 9th and the draft is 2 weeks away and player option deadlines are 3 weeks away and then free agency and stuff, how massive this offseason is for the Timberwolves specifically. And I know you and I cover the team. Maybe we have blinders on and I don't know exactly what's going on with like the Orlando Magic, but that domino thing I talked about earlier, like if you set the wrong dominoes up now, you could fuck yourself 2 years from now. And you have all of these decisions, including, like you said, like, is Rudy on the team next year? I'm very anti wanting this to look the exact same in October that it did to end May, but I don't know exactly how to get to that point. I don't know, like, yes, right. I think Terrence and Jalen and Rob specifically all have to be rotation players, but I'm also like, are you sure you just let Nickeil go? Like, do you just pivot now? Like, we've talked about this for a couple of years, like the 2 timelines thing. Is the older timeline maybe done, and do you become a smaller, faster team that plays more Jaden at the 4 or at the 5 in small doses? So
there's so many different ways you could sharpen this team, right? Like, and it's not limited to like, it's just choosing the best tool to do so and sharpening it in the image of how you want this team to play. And that's why I think this expands beyond Tim Conley and gets into Chris Finch and sort of the vision of how you overall envision your roster being put together. And that's a real advantage I think we're seeing around the NBA, is the president of basketball operations and the head coach being on the same page. That's why the Julius Randle trade worked last season was because it was made in conjunction with Chris Finch to make Julius Randle work. So yeah, man, Evans, we can spend an hour talking about these trades and stuff like that, but there really are, it's like pictures and pictures and pictures of other pictures, of how you can make this all break down. And that's why the offseason stuff is fun. It's not just numbers. It's not just draft picks. It's also about the vision you have for how you're going to play basketball. Because if there's anything I think we've learned in the past 5-10 years of the NBA, it's not just about stacking up the team with the most talent. Look at the teams that Kevin Durant has been on for the past 5 years. It's about putting together talented teams that fit together, that can play within, one collective vision and identity. And that's really where the work, I think, of general managing, president of basketball operationing comes today, even more so than understanding like the second apron and mid-level exceptions and all that sort of stuff. It's what's your vision? What is your vision for how you want your team to play? And then what realistic paths are there within that vision? I think this is one of them. But I think there's really is a laundry list of ways this could break out.
And again, I don't mean to be over dramatic. I just legitimately think in my heart that in the next month could tell us what the next 3 to 4 years are like. And you could push back like, oh, dude, they traded Cat, in the 90th hour and you never saw that coming or whatever. And like, okay, I guess a little bit of that. But for me, when I think about all this and the flexibility, and I think flexibility in life is like one of the best things you can have. I also think of like where Tim Connelly came from in Denver. And I think personally that the Denver Nuggets couldn't beat OKC's Thunder in that 7th game and ran out of juice because of decisions that were made 2 years ago before that, and a year ago before that. You know what I mean? Like those dominoes started to set up, and now the big domino was, oh shit, we ran out of gas. We lost to the Thunder. If we would have beat them, maybe we would have won another title. So that is like the Timberwolves are now, as I've called it, like in the golden age of basketball. That's pretty low bar for this organization. But you're in a situation now where you're coming off back-to-back conference finals appearances. You're considered a really good team, but they're going to have to string together so many good moves here moving forward. Flexibility doesn't mean that everything's going to be easy or that like there's no risk. I think this team is facing a ton of risk and a ton of, if we misstep here, what does that look like 18 months from now, 24 months?
But that's not fear, man. That's not you fear mongering. That's like, that's just the reality of what happens when you have a star player like Anthony Edwards. Is every other team that's ever had a player as good or close to as good as Anthony Edwards, like it's hard to raise them right in the NBA and do so in a way that lasts for more than 5 years, up to 10 years. Like it's hard. And the hardness is like manifests in risk. And that's why it is about not just being risk averse, but making, smart bets and stuff like that. And I do think, that's kind of been the way Tim Connelly has moved with this, even if there were moves that he thought were smart moves, trading for Gobert, trading for Randle and stuff like that were questioned, but kind of, proved to be part of a bigger, smart, again, vision for this whole thing. And this whole thing attaches to Ant. So yeah, stakes are high. Stakes are really high right now. That doesn't mean you're in a bad spot. The stakes can only be high because they're in a good spot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and again, I go back to every single thing we talk
starting to break up a little bit on me.
Everything we talk about, everything we look at, it all circles back to Anthony Edwards. And every decision made needs to put him in the best chance to win at his prime age. And I think there's a lot of pressure on ownership and on front office and on the coaching staff to navigate these next couple weeks because, again, it'll set you up for the next couple of years.
Absolutely. This was fun, man. Yeah, appreciate y'all listening to it. I'm sure for some of you are like, whoa, this episode is way too far in the weeds. And if that's the case, you're probably not listening to me saying this part right now, but that's all right. I do think it was important. It was at least important for me to kind of list this all out and get a real feel for the Wolves salary cap and understanding of the rules before just coming on here and being like, yo, let's talk about KD trades. Because I think a KD trade makes sense for this team, but in context. And if I pushed anything through here, I would like to push through the idea that context starts with defining what Julius Randle, Naz Reid, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker's free agency markets are this summer, what the numbers you can retain them are at. And if you can do that at a reasonable number that keeps you under the second apron or close enough to the second apron, just to a spending point that you know that you can survive with, then you don't need to be desperate and trade for Kevin Durant. Or I think the desperate trading for Kevin Durant is trading for Kevin Durant and giving up a few picks, or like Rob Dillingham and stuff with them. They don't even need to go through that door at all until they find themselves pushed to a position where the current roster they have can't just be run back. So it's going to be fascinating to track. I'll be sharpening my own sort of thoughts on it as we move through the rest of June and into July, and we'll keep talking about it. But I appreciate you sitting over there and nodding along with me as I poked around at the spreadsheet.
Buckle up, man. For real. Like,
Yep.
I feel refreshed. We needed that week off or so. It's been a couple weeks since I got bounced. And now as the finals kind of wind down, as soon as game 5 or game 6, whoever hosts the Larry O'Brien, like, it is going to be, if you like the transactions and all the rumors on stuff, it is going to be one of the best summers ever for that type of stuff. As many teams navigate these new rules, these new CBA stuff, while also trying to be like, hey, the Thunder could host the Larry O'Brien in a week and a half day, and I think a bunch of teams, like, we still don't respect them, and we think we can win now too. And that's going to be, if multiple teams or a bunch of teams think we can win now, we can carve out that window, like maybe Minnesota. It's going to make for, and that's what you want as a fan, is like teams going for it. So I expect to see a lot of teams going for it. I expect to see the Wolves going for it, and I'm sure you'll have it all covered here at the Dane Moore podcast.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to track, and we also have draft stuff that we need to get into. I know we only got 16 days or whatever to the draft. I'm gonna start digging into that to get just a elementary understanding of this draft. I haven't had time to really dig into it, but we got that to come here still too, which certainly ties into a lot of these questions and scenarios that we were rolling through. What is the value of that 17 and 31 pick? I need to get a better feel for that by getting a better feel for this draft. So we'll do that. You mentioned Tyler Metcalf off the top. I know you and I were reading the No Ceilings draft guide. Yeah. Check that out. And hopefully I want to connect with Tyler. I usually have him on before the draft. He knows the draft incredibly well through the work he does at No Ceilings, but also knows the Wolves well as a local Minnesotan. So maybe we'll get him on here soon. That's kind of what's coming up here on the pod. We'll do something later in the week. I'm not sure if it'll be draft specific or whatever it might be. We still need to get Jace on, but more to come on the show. And we'll just, when there's news, we'll try and jump on it quickly. And when we're prognosticating or making up topics to talk about, we'll do that here. We'll do that here too. And try and stay on top of all of it. Yeah. So later this week, maybe Thursday or something, we'll do another episode. But until then, he's Kyle Theige. I'm Dane Moore. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards